Mr. Aghi, thank you very much for joining
Thank you.
us. The Indian negotiating team has returned, but does any deal look unlikely before the 1st of August now?
Well, the current scenario is such that the cabinet of U.S. government had recommended a deal to the president, and president basically came back and said that I want a deal which is similar to Indonesia and Vietnam. When you look at the Indonesian deal and Vietnam deal, they are basically one-sided deal, where in the case of Indonesia, basically zero tariff on U.S. goods coming into Indonesia, full market access to agriculture, dairy, and also Indonesia will buy roughly $15 billion worth of U.S. energy and place order of over 50 777 Boeing planes, and almost 20% tariff on Indonesian exports to the US. So it is not a reciprocal deal. It is a one-sided deal. And you can't take the same model and apply it to India, where India has a $200 billion trade uh, agreements between the two countries, and that trade is going up and up itself. But more important is India is a much larger economy with over 4 trillion in GDP, and more important is 1.4 billion people. So I think the government of India has pushed back because they would like to have a reciprocal partnership, a fair deal, which is win-win for both countries, and that's where the whole negotiations have stalled.
Uh, if there is no deal, and currently the likelihood of it is almost next to impossible, will India see 26% reciprocal tariffs imposed from the 1st of August, with the US government now saying that that deadline, 1st August deadline, is very, very clear?
Well, there's a lot of possibilities, but we have seen deadlines being moved forward multiple times. I think it is in the interest of India, it is in the interest of US to come to a common platform, and drive a win-win value proposition between the two countries. You also have to understand the other complexities here. There is a stress point from Trump administration and BRIC nations, where basically there's a threat of imposing massive tariff on BRIC nations if they go from de-dollarization. Then you have what you call as Lindsey Graham bill, which is about to be put in front of the Senate, and which imposes basically 100% tariff if you buy Russian oil. So it is a complex environment, but also a very dynamic environment. But both Indian side and the US side are trying to see if they can find a common ground. But more importantly, you have to understand that India cannot strike a deal which is one-sided. It cannot strike a deal where it opens up its farm sector completely to the US, and especially on religious ground on the dairy side also.
Right. Does it look very difficult at this point to have a deal at all? Because, you know, the Trump administration has been making positive noises, but if they continue demanding a one-sided deal and concessions on agriculture and dairy, these are absolute red lines. We will not compromise. In fact, the Commerce Minister has said that whatever we do, we will not compromise the interests of farmers, the MSMEs, and Indian workers in any trade deal for that matter. So if the Indian government is publicly taking that stand, clearly something is not right.
Well, that's understandable. I think when you have a 60% of the population working on the agriculture and producing roughly 16 to 17% of GDP, so they are on subsistence, and you don't want to expose them. On the dairy side, it is important to understand it's a religious issues because the cows are fed meat products in the US, and you can't basically take the same product and feed it to the Indian population. I think the US side understands that. It's just a matter of trying to work the process within the administration. But more important is the relationship between the two countries. It's not just on trade. It's a much bigger relationship. You have a large Indian diaspora, which is contributing to the local economy. There are geopolitical issues where India and US are aligned very, very strongly. Yes, there will be some disagreement on the trade side, which is understandable. India has to protect its farmers. India has to protect basically its economy. At the same time, U.S. is saying, hey, we want a fair trading agreement with its partners, including India. So I think it's a matter of time when both countries can come to some kind of understanding. At the moment, the sentiments are high, and U.S. is insisting because it won a one-sided deal with Indonesia, with Vietnam, and also if you look at with China, in the sense that U.S. is basically putting almost 55% tariff on Chinese goods coming into the U.S., while its exports to the U.S. is much lower level. So I think what we are seeing is a one-sided process taking place, and India is one of the first countries which is kind of pushing back and saying, "Hey, listen, let's talk. Let's make sure we have a deal which is win-win and fair for both nations."
The US negotiating team led by Brendan Lynch is supposed to come to India in August now for the 6th round of talks. What's going to be the purpose of those negotiations, considering there's been no headway before the 1st August deadline?
The objective is to find a common ground. You have to understand that India is still a growing economy. It is a economy which is one-fourth the size of the U.S. and much less itself, and its exports does have a trade surplus, but I think India is committed to buy more energy from the U.S. to bring that to a balance itself. The objective here is to find, you don't have to open a full agriculture sector. For example, lentils can be exported from US to India because India is one of the largest consumer and also importer of lentils. Or you can look at soya. India does not basically grow so much soya. At the same time, India does not consume so much soya, but soybean, and so it's important. So I think what we have to do is just don't have a blanket agriculture segment, break it down, see where the farmers are impacted, for example, in rice, wheat, and maize, and look at other possibilities, opening the dry fruits, opening some of the fruits area. So we just need to get more granular in every aspect and ensure that we are able to find a common ground and drive this trade deal to a win-win value proposition.
Right. Just to also ask you, do you expect both leaders to pick up the phone and talk to each other anytime soon? Or do you feel that the temperatures are way too high right now?
I don't think the temperatures are high. I think you have to understand the style is different. You have a president who is a center of power, who is focused more on micromanaging almost every aspect of the uh, policy decision coming out of Washington D.C., and so he gets involved in every decision making. Whereas in India, you have again, just like US, a democracy, and you have a cabinet which drives. You have the opposition, which questions basically the ruling party itself. So the process are very different, and I think it makes no sense at this stage either the president or the prime minister getting on the phone and having a conversation, because unless you find a common ground to take this forward, you'll be wasting a phone call between the two leaders.
Right. And finally, Mr. Aghi, before we let you leave, if US goes ahead and imposes a 26% tariff on India on the 1st of August, along with all the sectoral tariffs, this could finally damage the prospect of any future deal?
No, that's not the end of the world. I think when you look at the current 10% tariff on Indian goods, we are seeing the exports are still going up. Part of it is being consumed by the local buyers in the US, and part is being borne by the exporters itself. So when you go from 10 to 26%, yes, it's going to be challenging. It's going to hit the profits. It's going to make Indian goods more expensive in the US. But that is not the end of the world. You have to understand that there are certain principles uh, that has to be adhered to, and there's certain protection and red lines which you cannot be crossed. In the case of India, is the farm sector, is the dairy sector. And so it's important that we need to keep on explaining to the US side that why is critical. Let's take a smaller pie, make that a successful, and keep on working on the bigger pie at later stage. So I don't think if India gets hit by 26% tariffs, that's the end of the world, because there are bigger things to protect, and that's what the government is trying to do.